So, is it whiskey or whiskey? Well, this is the first video in a series where I hope to break down the world of whiskey into something a little bit more approachable and easy to understand, from whiskey to rye, bourbon, and more. But for today, I just want to talk about the basics, good old whiskey. If you are at home, feel free to grab your favorite glass. I've got mine, and we'll get started. Tastes like whiskey. Whiskey is essentially a type of liquor made from fermented grains. Basically, it has just 3.5 or 4 ingredients. We have cereal grains, which are then fermented with yeast in water and then aged in wood. Starting at the top here, cereal grains. There are so many different varieties used, but the most popular ones will be barley, corn, rye, and wheat. We could get deep here. For example, there is 2-row or 6-row barley, and we could talk about the quality of the barley or the season, and more. But for now, let's just stick with basics. Grains. Those grains are processed to convert their starches into fermentable sugars. To do this, the grains are first crushed up or milled. After they're milled, they're put in a large container of hot water and mixed. This is called mashing. So far, it's the same process as making beer. This helps the grains naturally release enzymes and convert starches into sugars. Once this process is completed, the liquid, now called a wort, is ready to ferment. It's easy to gloss over this step, but water here is so important because it brings with it all sorts of minerals and nutrients, as well as different levels of acidity. This is why you will often hear about a water's source when talking about whiskeys or on labels from different regions. So once this wort is transferred to a fermentation vat, the sugary, watery wort, high in sugars, is ready for yeast. The yeast, a live organism, metabolizes or eats the sugars, and the byproduct of this is a production of alcohol, carbon dioxide, and flavorful compounds known as congeners. You'll want to Google that word. There are various strains of yeast that many distillers use because yeast can also affect flavor. So this fermentation process also needs to be done at a very specific temperature, optimal for the yeast to thrive. Some distillers will use a sweet mash, which is where they introduce new yeast each time. Others will use a sour mash, which is reusing some of the yeast collected from an already fermented batch. Other distillers also have a very specific yeast that only they use, and this yeast is then kept alive and passed down over the decades, much like a family's sourdough starter. Once fermentation is done, usually a few days, the wort is now called a wash, or a distiller's beer. Very fancy name, right? So far, I've talked about how cereals, water, and yeast all come together. Before we get to the wood part, we need to finish turning this distiller's beer into a spirit. This is done through, surprise, surprise, distillation, right? This is where something is distilled. Here, the wash, or the distiller's beer, is transferred to a copper pot still or column still. The purpose of a still is to heat the liquid, or wash, to a temperature just high enough to evaporate the alcohol, but not so high that it evaporates the water. Yes, alcohol evaporates at a lower temperature than water. The alcohol vapor travels up the still, where it condenses back down into a distilled spirit. But this is usually done a number of times to purify it even more, usually 2 or 3 times. So you might be wondering, why is it always copper? Or does it always have to be copper? Copper naturally removes sulfur-based compounds, which just truthfully would taste gross. So now we have a purified alcohol called a distilled spirit. Again, very original, I know, right? This distilled spirit is usually 70 to 80% alcohol by volume, and at this point it's still clear. It doesn't have this. So you might be asking yourself, why is whiskey a amber or gold color then? Well, if it's done in its purest form, we get to the next step. This is where the wood comes in. Aging. Whiskies need to age in a wood cask and will vary by law depending on country. Canada and Scotland have a minimum of 3 years for it to be called a whiskey, while the United States has a minimum age of 2 years, I think. There is a lot of debate about age statements, but many of the laws come from governments trying to, you won't be surprised here, regulate the production of whiskey. Age statements on whiskeys serve both a political and economic purpose. I'll go on a bit of a tangent here. Forgive me, feel free to skip ahead if you don't want to hear my politics. But politically, they try to ensure transparency and consumer protection. Here in Canada, by 1890, we were the first country to pass legislation requiring that whiskey be aged. A move that was intended to ensure quality, but of course about tax collection. There's no surprise there. The government loves their tax, especially on our liquor here in Canada. So purposely, this meant it was less profitable or even possible for some to continue operating. The goal was to provide consumers with a clear indicator of quality and to differentiate products in a very overcrowded market. Sadly, though, this also means it's very difficult for craft distillers wanting to make whiskey right now to even start up. Okay, back to my point, aging. Just like the varieties of grains, wood casks are made in various sizes and from various woods. You have American oak, French oak, Hungarian oak, and more. As the whiskey sits in these casks, a variety of processes are happening. Some evaporation, otherwise known as the angel's share, occurs. Extraction, oxidation, filtration, and of course, coloration, if that's a word. Probably more, I'm not a scientist, but all this to say that the wood is imparting flavors, color, and aroma into the spirit. This clear distilled spirit now comes out with beautiful color. Though some distillers out there, especially from Scotland, add E150A, otherwise known as spirit caramel, which is food coloring that gives whiskey its caramel or amber color. I'll just leave that bit of information there for you to ponder how you feel about it while I take a drink. So after it's been matured to a distiller's liking, or to the age statement requirement, it's ready for bottling. Typically, once a number of casks or barrels are ready, they're all dumped together into a large vat. This is called mingling. Or if it's being turned into a blend, they might obtain barrels from another distillery to mingle with. This creates a blended whiskey. You'll have to watch my video on blended whiskey to learn a little bit more about that. I'll eventually record that one. But right now, the liquid that went into the cask comes out quite high. It went in 70 to 80% ABV, but is coming out 60 to 65% alcohol by volume. The distillers typically dilute it even more, closer to 40 to 45%. You might see cask strength or barrel strength labels. Those, of course, mean they were not diluted. I think I covered it all, but I'm sure you will let me know in the comments below if I got something wrong or missed something. But for now, let's do a quick recap. So, 4 ingredients: cereal grains, yeast, water, and wood. Those 4 ingredients went through a process of grain prep, which was milling, mashing, fermentation, distilling, and then aging. After that, possibly mingling or blending, and then diluting and bottling. To wrap this up, I hope this introduction to the world of whiskey has sparked your curiosity and provided you with a bit of information you didn't know before. Whiskey by no means is simple. There's tons out there, lots of great videos on YouTube, lots of forums. Go do some searching, but also remember, it's just the beginning. There's everything you can read and watch, but go explore, right? What are the tastes of bourbon or rye, right? The spicy, bold flavors of rye or the sweet notes of bourbon, right? Check all of those out and learn from yourself. I think next I will dig into single malt scotch. So what? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.